Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional league, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Hope you guys are all doing well. As always, guys, I am your host, Marcus Vargas, and today, another packed show. All right, guys, to start today's show, gotta talk about them. Gotta talk about them boys. Dak Prescott and the Cowboys did not get the deal done in time. Now, I saw this coming. It felt inevitable at a while back. Once, we were hearing what some of the numbers were, we kind of had an idea of what Dak Prescott wanted from the Cowboys, et cetera, et cetera. But now that it's finally come around and happened, it's interesting to think about because, it felt like one of those things that maybe, okay, whatever. I felt, okay, this is inevitable. But in the back of my mind, not gonna lie, I felt, I was like, nah, they'll get it done because, the same thing happened with Zeke, right? Where, Jerry Jones is saying he doesn't want to reset the market. Then all of a sudden, boom, market reset. But this is a bit different. And I just want to give my opinion, who wins and loses in this deal. Honestly, Dak Prescott wins this out of this situation, not the deal. Clearly, they didn't make one. The Cowboys, if you asked me, who regrets it more, I would tell you the Cowboys, but they began regretting it way back, 2 years ago, a year ago, when they didn't sign sign him to an extension sooner, right? So that's what they're regretting already. I don't know if they're regretting not signing him now, because of the number that he wanted. But I know that they regret not doing this deal earlier and being ahead of the curve when Dak Prescott was clearly outperforming his draft selection, his draft spot. But now, I would say that now the Cowboys are going to regret it more just because I don't think Dak's going to regret it at all. Because I think the QB market will be just fine for him. Some team is going to need a quarterback. He's young. He showed, when a team is in need, they overpay, right? And so, let's say, if the Cowboys had him and they wanted to give him $35 million a year, a team that desperately needs a QB might give him his $40 million, might give him $40+ million a year. Who knows, So, it's very interesting that it came down to this. I'm not surprised, but honestly, I think that this here is the beginning of the end of Dak Prescott's time as a Dallas Cowboy. It feels, a little bit deeper than just him wanting a number that they didn't want to stick to. It feels like things got personal, because for this deal not to get done, like I said, while I knew, this isn't going to happen because of his number, it is a bit shocking that he didn't, dip down, I thought he would give in. I thought he had the chance to give in, I should say. And there were, reports that, they came back to the table, but it was literally just a matter of time. They didn't have enough time to get a deal done. But Dak Prescott's still going to make a pretty penny next season. But honestly, I just really don't believe the Cowboys are going to sign him to a deal because, one, they're going to have to wait so long to get back into these contract talks, right? And then next offseason, we'll do this all over again. But where do you go from here, right? If you don't want to pay Dak Prescott his asking price right now, if Dak Prescott continues at the same level, even if he has a similar season to last season, his number's not going to change. And when other quarterbacks get their deals, say another quarterback gets their deal next season, before he does, his price is only going to go up. The only way he might even take a lower number is if he has a pitiful season. It has to be horrible. It doesn't have to be just a little worse than last season, a little dip. It has to be abysmal. And if he does better than last season, his price is certainly going to go up. Should Mike McCarthy, help lead this team to a playoff spot, a deep playoff run, a Super Bowl appearance? Oh my goodness, that's going to be rough. But I do think getting to a Super Bowl, it's going to make Jerry Jones sign a blank check because he's finally going to get to taste that Super Bowl again, right? He has said there's no check, big enough that I won't cash for a Super Bowl, right? So we know what that means to Jerry Jones, and we know that he basically will do anything to get his hands on another Lombardi Trophy, on the Lombardi Trophy. Now, what's interesting to me, or what's most interesting, I guess, is looking back on the fact that Ezekiel Elliott was in a similar situation. Of course, he wasn't asking for as much money, but that's quarterback money, right? We kind of established that. Whether it's fair or not, the quarterback position is said to be the most important on the field, and it's the guy who makes the biggest bucks on the team. He touches the ball basically every single play, is the commander-in-chief, and it's just, very integral to the success of a team. Now, what's interesting is when you look at the Cowboys, their commander-in-chief, the leader of the team, the guy who touches the ball every play, most important position on the field, he hasn't gotten his payday. And he's certainly played well enough to receive that payday. And so I think that's where, where this situation got sticky, because he outperformed his position. We know this already. He outperformed where he was drafted. He's done very, very well. He's performed comparably to other quarterbacks who have received very sizable contracts. And they waited on him, and they paid the running back. They let the running back negotiated them into resetting the market. And so when you're Dak Prescott, you're saying, I'm the quarterback. So whatever I say, I'm going to give you a number, and of course I better get my money. I've been helping lead this team. What is he, a 2-time division winner? He had a great, was a 12-4 or a 13-3 season not too long ago. It's just, he has the credentials. Not only is he doing these things, he's also, was drafted. He's not a first-round draft pick, right? And not even a second-round draft pick. So, the Cowboys really got themselves in it this time. And they have no one to blame but themselves because they didn't look ahead. I guess that's what, that's one thing that kind of baffles me the most, because, what were they thinking, right? I want to know at what point, did someone decide this is not our guy, right? Because I think that's become pretty evident. If they believed that it was their guy, they'd have cut the check, and they'd have cut the check a bit earlier, right? Patrick Mahomes still has 2 years left on his deal, and he got his extension, right? And, it happens very similarly to other quarterbacks, right? We saw it with Wentz, we saw it with Goff. But for some reason, the Dallas Cowboys just kept hanging on the Dak and didn't give him his extension, and now it's just too late. And for me, it's just so difficult. It's so difficult to imagine that after all this, mess, that next offseason they get the deal done. Because then you just look stupid at that point, right? Especially if you're the Cowboys. You didn't sign the deal, last offseason. There was drama. And you waited in a whole nother season for more drama just to make this guy wait and sign the same exact deal that he wanted before. I don't know. It seems silly. It doesn't make sense at this point. I don't think they're going to do it. And I think Dak Prescott's going to test free agency. Now, interestingly enough, there have been some, odds released on the favorites to land Dak Prescott at their next offseason, and they're very interesting. Bet Online has the Indianapolis Colts as the favorite at 6-1, and the Chicago Bears right behind them at 7-1. And then the Vikings, who are also listed with the Los Angeles Chargers, have 8-1 odds to land him. Very interesting to see the teams that are the favorites right now to land Dak Prescott next offseason, because Indianapolis Colts have Phillip Rivers right now. They just made an investment in him. And that would mean that Phillip Rivers either performs very poorly or he retires. And then, the Indianapolis Colts have to basically start all over again. But the one I'm most interested in, honestly, is, the Chicago Bears. Maybe the Los Angeles Chargers. The Vikings, to me, doesn't make the most sense, considering they just extended Kirk Cousins, and he's with them for the next couple of years. And, I guess maybe if the Vikings were to trade with the Dallas Cowboys and put Kirk Cousins on the Cowboys, which would be, I wouldn't like that move, but I don't see the Vikings. But the Bears are very interesting because you guys know I'm not the biggest Mitchell Trubisky fan. I'm not sure if Nick Foles is just going to come in and save life in Chicago. I know that there's competition there in Chicago for that spot, but I don't think either of those guys is a guy who, franchise guy, untouchable, irreplaceable. And I think they would welcome a guy like Dak Prescott in Chicago. I think he's more of what they need rather than Mitchell Trubisky or Nick Foles. The Los Angeles Chargers are another very interesting one. Of course, we have to see what Tyrod Taylor does. I really don't believe that next season, Tyrod Taylor is just going to have some insane season and they're going to stick with him for the long haul. I remember, they did draft Justin Herbert, but and that would be, the thing that's keeping them from getting, Dak Prescott. They just drafted a quarterback. They're going to want to, he's a project for them. They drafted him with, one of their top, it was, I think, 5th or 6th overall. They drafted Justin Herbert. So it's pretty hefty investment in the future of their franchise. So that one doesn't make the most sense. It wouldn't make any sense at all to be picking him up to have him be on the bench. So the Chargers would clearly be picking up Dak Prescott from the start. I think that one is not likely to happen because something serious would have to happen to Justin Herbert. An injury or just really, really poor play, and he had to be a huge bust. But yeah, the one I really do like is the Chicago Bears. I think that one makes a lot of sense. I think it's somewhere where Dak can go. Dak can go and sort of turn the offense around because right now, man, Chicago, that defense is really suffering. Sort of the antithesis of the Kansas City Chiefs when their offense was so potent, but their defense was absolutely abysmal. Chicago Bears have a great defense and an abysmal offense. But yeah, like I said, I'm in the camp of cut the check. I know previously when I spoke about this, sometimes, I felt, I understand Dak, but sometimes I felt, I understand the Cowboys, but, after seeing, Mahomes get that mega deal, and it's not even, I hate to, just use my Chiefs as an example because I don't want to seem like I'm always want to talk about them because I'm biased or anything. But it is a valid example of the commitment a team can make to a player and the trust that they have in that player. Of course, the Chiefs showed it to a very exaggerated, extreme degree with that contract length and size. But why hasn't Dak Prescott received that kind of trust from the Dallas Cowboys? I feel like at this point, even just Dak as a player is just like, I'm out of here, man. They don't care to sign me. They don't trust me. They don't believe in me to be their guy for the long haul. I'll take him to a Super Bowl, right? Because if you believe a guy can take you to and win a Super Bowl, you're going to pay him as much as you can, right? And so, unfortunate situation they found themselves in. Another piece of this too, Dak's brother tweeted some pretty jarring. Actually, I want to see if I can pull those up right now. But Dak Prescott tweeted some pretty harsh comments about the Cowboys. Let me see if I can pull this up here. So, Tad Prescott, Dak's brother, says, there is a reason I was never a Dallas Cowboys fan. He tags him at Dallas Cowboys fan. Growing up or before they drafted at Dak, clearly his brother. After today, who knows how much longer I'll be cheering for them. Ooh. So that is, that's some pretty spicy stuff there. Like that's, when a family member is publicly, out there, talking about something of that magnitude, something that's pretty, that's a strong opinion. What I tend to think, at least, is that's echoing what the player has spoke about or the player's sentiments, right? I don't think unless you're just really stupid, to be honest, you're just going to go out there tweeting bad things about the team that your relative plays for, even though they love the team or something like that. That would just be silly, because you're a representation of your relative, right? So, you know what I mean? Like, people are just going to think, oh, that's how Dak feels about the Cowboys as well, because they didn't get this deal done. And, who knows what they talked about. We got the report that they tried to get the deal going. Apparently it had a $50 million signing bonus and $70 million over the first 2 years. Apparently, it was between 33 to 35 million annually with 110 guaranteed. But the time just ran out, so we'll have to see. We'll have to see next offseason where this lies. So hopefully we'll get more info on what happened, at the 12th hour soon. But it's pretty insane. Is that the same? Is it the same? The 12th hour? The 11th hour? I don't know. Is it the 23rd hour? I don't. The 11th hour, right? I don't know. Either way, we're going to go into our first break of the day, guys. And when we get back, we're going to talk about some more COVID-19 stuff, because it's becoming more and more relevant to the start of the NFL as we approach, training camp and all that good stuff, and how, the conditions of certain places are deteriorating, and we're seeing things, almost getting shut down again. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after this short break. Enjoy. And we'll be talking about coronavirus and the NFL.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Alrighty, guys, welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We are back. We just got done talking about America's favorite team to hate, the Cowboys, and now we touch on a bit of a more depressing topic: the pandemic and the NFL. Now, I want to talk about this because J.J. Watt recently had a series of tweets with some information about, the league's protocol about returning to play. I'll actually read the tweet and sort of go over, player reactions, what I think, etc., etc. So, he says, once again, in the interest of keeping everyone, parentheses, players and fans, end parentheses, as informed as possible, here's an updated list of what we as players know and don't know as the first group gets set to report to training camp tomorrow. That was 11 hours ago. Check it. First thing he says, we want to play. A sentiment I believe most of the league actually shares, right? Whether they're sitting out or not, I think, a lot of these guys, like, they really do want to play, right? And so, we do have to remember that they do want to play, but they want to be safe. Second quote, or second bullet point here: we want to be as safe as possible, of course. Third bullet point: the NFL can mandate that players show up to training camp regardless if any agreement has been reached between the NFL and NFLPA. Interesting. Fourth bullet point, we still have not been granted the full and proper training camp acclimation period necessary as recommended by the medical and training staffs. 5, we still do not know if there will be daily testing, every other day testing, etc. 6, we still do not know if there will be preseason games or not. Huh? That's insane. 7, we still do not know how a positive COVID test will be handled in regards to others in close contact, parentheses, in the huddle, directly engaged with, comma, etc., end parentheses. 8, a strong and fair opt-out clause for those at higher risk or those with family members at higher risk has still not been agreed upon. I think I said 8, 9, if players do not show up on time, they can be fined or considered in breach of contract even if health and safety protocols have not been agreed upon or infectious disease emergency response plans have been approved. And he ends it with a bullet point that says, we want to play. Pretty intense stuff. Because this is serious. And some of these things here, I'm honestly quite shocked at. The fact that players can be fined or considered in breach of contract, even if infectious disease emergency response plans have not been approved or agreed upon. That sort of blows my mind. The fact that these players still don't know if and when they're going to be tested, because he said we don't know if we're even going to be tested. When they haven't been granted full proper training camp acclimation, the period that is recommended by medical and training staffs, of the league. What is the NFL doing here? And you see the replies, to this post, and it's honestly, some of them are awful, of course, because it's the internet. But there are a lot of people just saying, play, don't play, I don't care. Sorry to say this, but nobody's watching the NFL anyway. Other people are saying, play or stay home, someone else will take your place, buddy. People are out there working 40 hours a week, for a fraction of what you make. And I just really think that that's the wrong angle. I really think, that's not the way we want to be addressing this. I, for one, I'll give my opinion here. I think this is an important post. I'm glad that J.J. Watt made this post, and I do not, not going to condemn him for making this post no matter how much money he makes, right? Whether you're a billionaire, trillionaire, you make, 100, 6 figures, 7, whatever, or you make 5 figures a year. You want to be safe, right? From the poorest to the richest, we all want to be safe. And so to tell someone, because they make tons and tons and tons of money, that, shut up and stop caring about being safe is just not right. Right? They're still human beings. I say this all the time. No matter how much money these guys make, no matter how much, we glorify them and see them as heroes, role models, not human because of the things that they do on the field, they are, at the end of the day, fathers, brothers, sisters, mothers, husbands, everyone who works in the NFL. So, guys, we have to remember that these aren't just players. They're not just toys for our entertainment. So they're allowed to want to be safe. And I think, everybody has to respect that. If you don't, how can you call yourself a fan of these players and of the sport? If you're not a fan of, J.J. Watt, the person, then you can't be a fan of J.J. Watt, the player. You know what I mean? I guess, you can get specific with that, but you get what I'm trying to say. You get what I'm trying to say. Just because he wants to protect himself doesn't mean he should be condemned. And a ton of other players are chiming in. Tons of guys who are big voices in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes says, getting ready to report this week, hoping the @NFL will come to an agreement with the safe and right protocol so we can feel protected playing the sport we love. # we want to play. Russell Wilson's post is a little bit more intense. I'm concerned, period. My wife is pregnant, period. At NFL training camp is about to start, ... And there's still no clear plan on player health and family safety. Then he puts a shrugging emoji. We want to play football, but we also want to protect our loved ones. Hashtag we want to play. Drew Brees, we need football, we need sports, we need hope. And this one's pretty jarring. The NFL's unwillingness to follow the recommendations of their own medical experts will prevent that. If the NFL doesn't do their part to keep players healthy, there is no football in 2020. It's that simple. Get it done at NFL. Pretty intense. Myles Garrett echoes the same statement. If the NFL doesn't do their part to keep players healthy, there's no football in 2020. It's that simple. And it bothers me, why hasn't the NFL figured this out sooner? There really is no time to be wasted here, coming up with plans, coming up with all this stuff. There needs to be a plan in place like the NBA bubble, right? Where we at least see they're trying to take all the actions necessary. Whatever flaws the NBA bubble has, people not following the rules, people breaking protocol, that's because of the players in the bubble, not necessarily because of the bubble itself. Whatever flaws it has, the NBA is trying. The NBA is showing they're making a massive effort to, try and be as safe as possible and have these guys living in a bubble, basically, so that we can continue to have the sport of basketball. The NFL, though, it just seems like they're just waiting for the coronavirus to disappear. That's not how it's going to work. Todd Gurley says, you want to watch football this year? Us players need to remain healthy in order to make that happen. The NFL needs to do their part in order to bring football back safely in 2020. Hashtag we want to play. Deshaun Watson, it is disheartening to hear the NFL is unwilling to follow the recommendations of their own experts regarding player health and safety. If we want to have a full season, all caps, on the full, the NFL needs to listen to their experts! ! Hashtag we want to play. This one here, definitely one that stings. If hashtag Adam Silver can respect the voices and protect his NBA players, why can't at NFL Commish do the same? Oof. Listen to your players. If we want to have a full season, it will have to look different with our safety as a priority. At NFL, make the necessary changes. Hashtag we want to play. That was by Stephon Diggs. And the list goes on and on. Richard Sherman, Carson Wentz, J.C. Treader, I believe lineman for the Browns. He chimes in as well. Man, the sentiment is the same. They all love the game. They want to play. They want to compete. But they got to feel safe. They got to go out there and feel like they're protected. They got to go out there and feel like they're, that the NFL cares about them. That their owners, coaches, staff, the brass of the franchises, that everyone cares about them and the commish. At the end of the day, it just really does not feel the same. It really feels like, man, the NBA, they're respecting their players' wishes, trying to do what they can. The NFL is just like, shut up and go out there and play football. It sucks, man. It sucks because the NFL is really looking like it's just taking a turn for the worst with this whole pandemic thing. It's not looking good for this season, which is awful. Because, like I said before, like I've said, plenty of times, if protecting everyone, helping, stop the spread of this virus means not having football, so be it. Right? So be it. It's not worth the risk of killing people, literally, right? But at this point, it feels like, yes, we have a real chance to, have football, to have sports, to see the NFL sort of slacking and not taking this as serious as they should. It's upsetting. It's definitely upsetting, definitely disappointing, because you want to feel like the guys who are in control of the NFL or anything really, something that you love. You want to feel like the people who create that thing, who are in charge of changing, upgrading, updating that thing, care as much as you do about that thing, right? We can put it in terms of, let's say you have your favorite game. Oh, perfect example, Madden. A lot of Madden players don't believe that, EA has the exact same, want or drive or desire to make that game great that they do. The whole Fix Madden franchise was trending on social media. Clearly the fans are very passionate about the game. And so you can kind of apply that situation to what's happening right now. The NFL players have their own hashtag, we want to play, just like Madden players had EA, Fix Madden franchise, whatever. And so we're seeing that here. You want to feel like something you're passionate about, the people who are in charge of that thing are as passionate about it as you are. And right now, it doesn't feel that way. It feels like the NFL is just trying to do anything they can to get everyone on the field so they can continue to make their money. And that's not the way we approach this. That is not the way. That is exactly why we are where we are now. The NFL Player Association president, actually, J.C. Tretter, that I mentioned earlier, he said, "What you are seeing today is our guys standing up for each other and for the work their union leadership has done to keep everyone as safe as possible. The NFL needs to listen to our union and adopt the experts' recommendations. #we want to play." Man, it sucks too. It sucks that the players even have to stand up for themselves because, as many have mentioned, they just want the NFL to follow the protocol that experts have recommended. Why is that so difficult? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that question. But it's a troubling one. It's troubling that I even have to ask that question, But as of right now, guys, it is what it is. I'm hoping that this situation really doesn't get worse because it really sucks. Really, really sucks. And it's just looking like the NFL is going to be the reason that we don't have an NFL season, right? Not even because of the pandemic, the way that it is. It's one of those things where, like how, the U.S. had trouble, tracking this thing, preventing this thing. The NFL is having trouble figuring out what it wants to do, what it needs to do. For some reason, it's so clear in plain sight, but they can't seem to figure it out. And that might mean no football for the players, no football for us, which of course the owners would hate as well because they ain't making any money. With that, guys, we'll go into our next break, and when we get back, we're talking all about the Washington Redskins. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after this short break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Alrighty there, guys. Welcome back. We are now into our third segment for today's show, and it's not, the best one. And it's because we are talking about, I guess I won't even call them by their former name anymore, but I guess Washington's NFL team. Man, there's a lot going on with them, and, it's not too hot. We know about, the name change. And actually, I'll touch on that first. I talked about the name change before, how I thought it would be great. Great for the team, great to change the culture. They're just a defunct franchise. They really have trouble. They're having trouble becoming a winning franchise, getting things going, no matter what. And, that could help. They announced, and I actually forgot to touch on this, which I regret, regrettably so, but they announced that they're officially changing the name. We don't know what that is yet, but we know that their name will no longer be the Washington Redskins, and that's awesome. That's great. I love the move. This is exactly what, the NFL needs right now. To all those fans, or quote-unquote fans, who don't think, then you don't really need to be a fan of the sport. And if you're not going to watch the NFL because of that, then the NFL doesn't need you. We don't want you. But I will say this. This is beyond overdue. It is so overdue, in fact, that it just feels... It doesn't feel as wholehearted as it should. It feels like forced. It feels like an apology that happens when a celebrity gets caught doing something on tape, and that tape gets sent to TMZ, and now they have to apologize for it. This has been a thing for years and years and years. This has been an issue. I'm sure it's been a big issue for Native Americans all around this country, all across the world, when the Washington Redskins were named the Washington Redskins. Very recently, I don't know the exact year off the top of my head, but there was an ad run. I think it was during one of the Super Bowls or one of primetime game. It was a very, poignant piece, a powerful piece, about the Redskins and, how, Native Americans, there are a lot of things. There are a lot of Native American groups. There's Cherokee and Lakota and Iroquois. I believe that's how you pronounce it. I learned about those in middle school. It seems so long ago. But a lot of them, they're saying, this is where I'm from. This is what I identify with. And the one thing they all agree on, no matter what tribe or group they belong to, they agree that none of them feel that they are Redskin. They don't call themselves Redskins. They don't identify as that, and it's pretty clear. That ad was run several years ago. I actually want to get the date on it. I'm looking that up for you right now because 2014, guys. That's when that ad was first released. Man, that is just... I didn't even remember that it was that long ago. I thought it was much more recent. But to see that... Wow. Yeah, that's kind of shocking. Sorry, guys, I'm just a bit speechless here because to think that, 6 years ago, that ad was run, and it was a pretty big deal. And it actually says here, watch the hashtag big game commercial the NFL would never air. Get involved by contacting the Washington professional football team, the NFL, and the Washington Post. In 2014, they have all the NFL commissioners' info, Washington Post and all that. But this did air on TV. I remember specifically seeing it on TV. That's why I did see it. Okay. Thank you. I can finally correct myself because I've been wrong this whole time. I'm going to correct myself. It was played during the NBA Finals. That's when it was played. So for all the times that I've said that I think it was during a Super Bowl or a big primetime game, I was wrong. I will admit that because that was just off the top of my head, and that's honestly my fault. That was irresponsible of me, but I remember it being run during a huge televised event. That's why I saw it on TV. But yes, the NFL never aired the commercial. They are correct. Clearly, they would know more than I would. And, just to get back on track, to see, 6 years ago, this was a problem. It was aired nationally, and it felt like nobody paid attention to it. This wasn't a big deal. Why did it take so much to happen in this country for the Washington team to change their name from something that is purely offensive? It's racist. It is prejudiced. It is horrible, man. It's horrible. It is horrible to think about when you really sit there and think about the name, literally identifying a group of people as red skin and naming a team that represents, in this professional league that represents so many people. That is just insane. And it's a shame. And it's, I'm not saying this is a great move now. But Dan Snyder and the rest of those people in the organization are not off the hook, right? It's very disappointing. I'm glad they're changing it. But now they have to deal with someone who has a bunch of trademarks he's holding a bunch of trademarks of a lot of names that the Washington team can possibly use. Apparently, there's a man who bought, or I'm not sure of the trademark process. He applied for a bunch of trademarks of a bunch of different names that the Washington team could possibly use after the Redskins announced their name and logo was being retired. Now that they're no longer the Redskins, they need a new name. A lot of people talked about the Red Tails being the next thing, but he has, trademarked, I think it was upwards of like 40 different team names. It's pretty insane. He's talked about, he said publicly he's trying to give them the name for free. He says they won't take my offer of free trademark, so I hired an attorney to facilitate the transaction. His name is Darren Heitner. He wrote a letter to Mr. Snyder with my offer, making it clear I was trying to facilitate the name change. I do not want to be an obstacle. Please, if you want one of Mr. McCauley's trademarks or me, trademark hog, as I like to go by, then just let us know. What does he need to do to get out of your way? Which is dope. He holds the rights to several notable trademark names, including Washington Monuments, Americans, Veterans, Red-Tailed Hawks, and Federals. So, this guy basically has a bunch of names that they could possibly use. That's another obstacle they have to get by. Hopefully that's not a problem. He seems like he's willing to cooperate, but it's just, of course, there's another kink in the hose, right? So, it's just another thing. And now I want to move on. I know it feels like I'm rushing through that, but I want to move on because I want to touch on the biggest thing that has come out recently about the Washington team. The Washington Post reported that 15 female former employees of that NFL franchise were sexually harassed during their time with the team. This is not surprising, unfortunately, in this day and age. This happens all too commonly, but for this to happen to, of course, this franchise, one, is not surprising because they're so defunct. But two, is just another sign that this franchise really, really needs to rebrand, reculture, and take serious action to move forward as an example of what doing the right thing is, rather than doing the wrong thing. They have a real chance here to not redeem themselves, but to at least sort of save face, if you will, for lack of a better term. The Redskins suck on the field, and they suck off the field. And hopefully they get this right, and they get their rebranding right. And they can change their entire culture, not only on the field, but of course off the field, and show NFL teams what they need to be doing when things like this. 15 former female employees said they were sexually harassed during their time with the team. It's just upsetting because you would think, in a world, 2020, right, where things are getting so progressive and there's so much change, that these things, wouldn't come up, hopefully, but they've already had people that are leaving the team, probably people whose names came up in accusations. But, yeah, another thing that Washington has to deal with. Hopefully, they can get these things right and settled, and those who are, perpetrators can be rightfully punished. But, man, the Washington Redskins are really not a good look for the NFL right now. Excuse me, not the Washington Redskins, because that's not their name anymore. The Washington NFL team, really not a good look right now for the NFL as a whole. And I think that's another reason why the NFL should really be helping and pushing the Washington team, helping them get a new name, helping them go through with this very thorough investigation, finding out what happened, who did what to who, because, there was reports, before this report came out, there were reports that, something big was going to come out of Washington, and then this comes out. It sucks. You want to hear trades. You want to hear the name got released. We don't want to hear this, right? And I'm not saying, no, I don't want to hear this. Oh my God, don't tell me about this. I'm saying, we don't want this to be happening. And it's just part of a long history of the NFL's, I don't know how to state this, but just lack of being there, lack of being prepared, lack of being the example. Sorry, I don't have a better term to describe it off the top of my head, but over the years, the NFL has really just shown a lack of responsibility to its fans, to its players, and to the many men and women who work for the NFL. And I'm just hoping right now this can be the signal for change. But as I'm saying that, you know, my thoughts just go right back to the players have to go on social media to talk about the things that, you know, air out their grievances about the NFL's protocol during a pandemic. And that concerns me. Because it's so hard to be a fan of this sport and to know that there's so many things that the NFL does wrong, right? It's tough. It's tough because it's a sport that I love. I'm always going to watch it. I'm always going to love it. But it's hard to know that they're just, not really aligning with the times. And I hope they can get this settled and fixed. And it's just tough. Dan Snyder released a statement. A lot of people have spoken pretty poorly about him. But he basically is saying, they're going to take this very, very seriously. He's saying, Ron Rivera made a statement saying, we have to move forward from this and make sure everyone understands. We have policies that we will follow. We have an open door policy with no retribution. And he also says, plus my daughter works for the team. And so, that would definitely get interesting. And he says, and I sure as hell am not going to allow any of this. Yeah, that's awesome too. But it's not just on the coach. It's on everyone else. Dan Snyder says, I just want to quote him. I don't want to get anything wrong and just say it off the top of my head. But he says, the behavior described in yesterday's Washington Post article has no place in our franchise or society. The story has strengthened my commitment to setting a new culture and standard for our team, a process that began with hiring Coach Rivera earlier this year. Beth Wilkinson and her firm are empowered to do a full, unbiased investigation and make any and all requisite recommendations. Upon completion of her work, we will institute new policies and procedures and strengthen our human resources infrastructure to not only avoid these issues in the future, but most importantly, create a team culture that is respectful and inclusive of all. Well, that certainly will be possible with the name change, and I'm hoping that he sticks to his word, because this is a perfect time to usher in a new era in Washington and make them, a team that everyone's really proud of. So, I know the Cowboys and all that are America's team, but a team that, represents Washington and can represent the country well, certainly has to do well within the franchise to make everyone feel equal, feel included, and safe. So with that, guys, we are going to end this segment. I know it wasn't the most lighthearted segment, but it's important stuff that we need to talk about because we want the NFL to, represent the best in us. We want the NFL to be inclusive and equal for all. We want the NFL to be safe. We want the NFL to be righteous, right? And set examples because of the huge platform that it has. And so with that, guys, we'll go into our last break. And when we get back, of course, we're going to be wrapping up the show. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after this short break.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Alrighty, everybody. Welcome to the last segment of the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. With today's last segment, what I wanted to do for you guys was sort of bounce around some topics, just like, you know, how we do in other news. I guess we'll call it in other news for today, because that's essentially what it is. Now, I want to start by talking about an article that Maurice Jones-Drew wrote about a week ago, and because the reason I want to talk about this is because what he said was pretty alarming. Check it out. It's honestly just one thing about this list, and if you read this, I'll just read the title for you. Ranking all 32 RB1s heading into 2020. Saquon Barkley at number 6. Yes, Saquon Barkley at number 6. Now, the reason why I don't like this list, besides the fact that, Saquon Barkley is outside of the top 5, he's essentially basing this on what he thinks is going to happen, what he thinks the production for these players is going to be. He has Christian McCaffrey ranked at number 1. Christian McCaffrey's 2019 stats: 1,387 rush yards, 4.8 yards per carry, 15 rushing TDs, 1,005 receiving yards, 4 receiving TDs. That makes sense. Christian McCaffrey is an absolute monster, and basically, if you're putting someone over him as number 1, you're just asking to be condemned and shunned out of the NFL. All your respect is just out the window, right, at this point. And it's hard to say that Christian McCaffrey is not going to repeat the dominance that he showed last season, barring any injury. He was insane. And number 2, he has Ezekiel Elliott. In 2019, Zeke rushed for 1,357 yards, only 30 behind Christian McCaffrey, but of course didn't have nearly as many receiving yards with 420 and 2 touchdowns, and he had 12 rushing TDs. Awesome production. A lot of people say it was a down year. Like I've said before, it really wasn't a down year. I honestly don't even mind Ezekiel Elliott here, number 2. Here's where things get very, very interesting. Okay. At number 3, Nick Chubb. Very interesting. Last season, Nick Chubb rushed for 1,494 yards. I believe that was good for second in the league. 5 yards per carry, 8 rushing TDs, 278 receiving yards. Now, the reason why I'm going to have trouble with this is because let's just skip to Saquon Barkley, right? Nick Chubb is at number 3. I'll go quickly through these next guys. Alvin Kamara's at 4, who didn't play a full 16 games, had 797 rush yards and 533 receiving yards. He only had 5 rushing TDs and 1 receiving touchdown. He has Joe Mixon at number 5, who had 1,137 rush yards on only 4.1 yards per carry. I'm not saying only, but when you compare it to these other guys, you know what I mean. Because Alvin Kamara had 4.7, Nick Chubb with 5, Zeke Elliott with 4.5, Christian McCaffrey with 4.8, Saquon Barkley with 4.6. He has the lowest yards per carry out of anyone in the top 6. But anyway, he had 1,137 yards, 4.1 yards per carry, 5 rushing TDs, 3 receiving touchdowns, and 287 receiving yards. Saquon Barkley, who also didn't play 16 games last season, 13 games, 1,003 rush yards, 4.6 yards per carry, 6 rushing TDs, 438 receiving yards, 2 receiving TDs. In only 3 less games, Saquon Barkley was only behind Joe Mixon by about 134 yards. He had more rushing TDs. He had 20 more receptions, just about, and almost 200 more receiving yards. Right? This is just last season. Fine. But he says here, Barkley is one of the most talented players in the NFL. There's no questioning that. But his pass protection is horrible. Remember when Jamal Adams grabbed the ball out of Daniel Jones' hands and took it to the house? Well, that was Barkley's block. He missed it, and it cost the Giants big time. I need to see this part of his game improve. I mean, listen, man. No disrespect. No disrespect. I don't have the insight. I didn't play football professionally in the NFL. I barely even played football when I did. But Maurice Jones-Drew, come on, man. So if you're telling me Saquon Barkley, who has the perfect tools at running back, receiving and running, he's great at those things, is rated below Nick Chubb, who clearly doesn't have the receiving part of the running back game in his tool belt, right? So to me, I really don't understand this. I really don't get this how for Nick Chubb, who really is not that good of a receiving back, he doesn't have that tool set. But that's not as important when ranking these guys for the production for next season as pass blocking. Do you see why I have problems with this article here? Because he says one thing isn't a mystery right now. One thing that isn't a mystery right now is the pecking order of all 32 RBs. Yep, that's right. The answer key is waiting for you below. And then he says, if a team operates with a running back committee, I simply chose a player who I think will have the most production in 2020. So, clearly, production is a big influence on these rankings. I really don't understand how, when you're talking about Saquon Barkley, and you're talking about ranking him amongst the best running backs, his inability or inefficiency at pass blocking has taken him out of the top 5. I'm sorry, that's just a bit insane. He has Derrick Henry at number 7, Dalvin Cook at number 8, Josh Jacobs at number 9, Aaron Jones at number 10. And honestly, I have no qualms with that. Because you can make cases for, all these guys. But for Saquon Barkley, there is no way you have him outside the top 5. That's a bit absurd. And to say that, Joe Mixon, everyone is really, really big on Joe Mixon right now. But to say that next season he will be better than Saquon Barkley is a bit insane. Let us not forget, Saquon Barkley is also behind that offensive line, just how Eli was and Daniel Jones was when everyone was calling it one of the worst in the NFL. And he still managed to have a ton of production. Not to mention last season he was dealing with injury and wasn't fully healthy. And listen, I'm not even a Giants fan. I'm a Chiefs fan saying this, so this is pretty insane. If you were thinking about this from a fantasy football standpoint, are any of you taking Nick Chubb, Alvin Kamara, or Joe Mixon over Saquon Barkley? Well, there you go. Maurice Jones-Drew wouldn't take Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, or Nick Chubb over Saquon Barkley. The only one I might give him here, maybe Alvin Kamara for the receiving potential, but that's about it. So I just wanted to share that. That list is sort of crazy. Definitely wouldn't use that list when thinking about fantasy football. But I wanted to talk about it because, guys, not everything you see written by experts is necessarily the best information to go by, because sometimes they just want to make some hot takes and they say some pretty crazy things. All right. Now, I want to jump to this next topic here because, as I talked about on a recent episode, Chris Jones and the Chiefs got the deal done. I don't know how. I don't know where they're getting this money from. I don't know the details. I'm not a contract expert, but they got it done, and I'm sure they were wise about when certain things kick in and when his guarantees kick in and how they do and all that good stuff. But it seems that right now the Kansas City Chiefs are the clear favorites to repeat as Super Bowl champions. Now, the reason why a lot of people probably will not, sort of lock that in is because the last time someone repeated was way back in the early 2000s. It was the Patriots. And it's been over a decade, I think over 15 years now since that has happened. But the reason why I believe the Chiefs can do it, take the fan out of the equation here. I'm not a Chiefs fan for right now because I don't want you to think I'm biased, but I have a question for you. If Dee Ford didn't line up offsides and the Chiefs win that game against the Patriots, right? Because I think everyone believed that had Dee Ford not lined up offsides, the Chiefs were going to win the game. Had that not happened, do you really think that the Chiefs couldn't beat the Rams? Do you really think that Patrick Mahomes wouldn't have won that first Super Bowl and would have gone back-to-back in these past 2 seasons here? And that's the reason why I think it is very possible for the Chiefs to go back-to-back. Patrick Mahomes in his first year as a starter lit up the league, 50 touchdowns, 5,000 yards. Only, the third player to do it? Ever in the history of football? Which is absolutely bonkers, but, and he, league MVP, second year as a starter, Super Bowl MVP, wins a Super Bowl, and now, almost, every starter on the offensive side of the football is still with the team, and they retained perhaps their best player on the defensive side of the ball, who was very, very vital to winning that Super Bowl. You don't think so? Just ask Jimmy Garoppolo. this is big. This is big. And if I had to say there was one team to dethrone the Chiefs, it would be the Baltimore Ravens. If I had to pick one from the NFC, it'd be very, very difficult. Just because the NFC is so loaded that it's very hard to pick who is coming out for the Super Bowl. But it would have to be one of those top dogs like the Saints, maybe the Buccaneers, should they, go insane and make it to a Super Bowl. A team with a great quarterback like the Seahawks, right? Because it's going to have to be a showdown. It's going to have to be, a shootout. And the other offense is going to have to put up numbers. So the team that beats Kansas City is going to have dynamic playmaking offense that can rival them with a defense that can slow them down. So that's why I say the Baltimore Ravens are for sure the biggest threat to the Kansas City Chiefs next season, because of how their team is built. That defense is going to be solid, as it seemingly always is. They've done what they need to shore up the run defense, and hopefully they can get that all, in check. Of course, not for the Chiefs' sake. Like I said, I'm not a fan right now. I'm hoping for the good stuff for the Baltimore Ravens. But I know the Chiefs haven't lost to the Ravens since getting Lamar Jackson, but they came very close to losing the first time. The second time, it seemed, the defense was just absolutely abysmal and let them mount a comeback that almost resulted in us losing. But, they're getting closer and closer to figuring it out and beating us, and they have the recipe, right? If their defense just didn't allow the big plays that Earl Thomas said they wouldn't allow, they have the recipe to run that ball, slow down the clock, slow down the offense, barely have Pat Mahomes on the field. And they can easily win that game, right? It was similar to what the Titans did to the Ravens, right? When you slow down a high-powered offense and run the ball a ton and you're successful with that, it's the key to winning the game. The Baltimore Ravens are going to be scary next season, but I think the Chiefs are going to be a little bit scarier. There's just something about the Chiefs and having that $450 million man locking in Chris Jones, who is the second best defensive tackle in football behind Aaron Donald. Let's not forget that. I think that's one thing. Chris Jones does not get enough credit. And I think, he's not on the, huge market team. Kansas City, amazing culture, amazing history, amazing team. But of course, it's not, an LA team. It's not a New York team. It's not Dallas, right? So, Chris Jones certainly doesn't get the recognition he deserves, I think, at least from, fans, and the media. But he is hyper efficient. Has the numbers to back it up over his career, and has shown, and he showed us in the Super Bowl, what he's capable of. And, if you look at it, I think without Chris Jones on the field, the Chiefs, they let up a touchdown more per game. So he is a difference maker. And, of course, any point differential is a difference between winning and losing. So for it to be, at least a touchdown spread with him and without him shows how important he is. I'm glad they got the deal done. They are certainly a lock for my number one going into the season for power rankings. If I had to give you my top three right now, it would have to be the Chiefs, Ravens, and the 49ers. Now, I do think the 49ers are the weakest out of those three, just because I think coming into this season, the Chiefs stayed intact. The Ravens made great additions, but right now, I think the 49ers had bigger losses than their additions, and so or retentions, and so that concerns me. Also, their season did feel a bit fluky. I'm not gonna lie; it's something that I did say during the season last season. And it's something that I've said here on the show. I felt like they arrived a bit too early. The team is super duper young. I think they'll regress a little bit. That season felt like an insane one-time season, and now it's a sophomore slump, right? But yeah. So Chiefs, my pick for the Super Bowl champs, super early. Ravens, tough competition, can easily knock them out. And 49ers for my top three teams right now heading into next season. All right, and with that, guys, I want to thank you for listening to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I want to ask that you follow us on all social media, guys, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at GSMC_F Football. Leave a comment, leave a great review, leave some constructive criticism so we know what we can do better here. I love you guys. Thank you for listening. I hope you stay safe, happy, and healthy. And, of course, as always, guys, we'll see you here next time. Have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.